Buenos dias, mi amigos. How are you guys? Are you guys doing fantastic? I hope you are. And welcome to another episode of A Taboo Life, where everyone has a story to tell. I'm your host, Drew Franks, or Frank for short, and I want to thank you guys again for listening. Come check out our website, ataboolife.com, where you can read some fantastic articles, short stories, poems, because I am that sappy, some novels, and other episodes of podcasts too. So check out the website, ataboolife.com, and don't forget to subscribe. Today's episode was recorded, just like the previous episode, in Ashville, North Carolina. I only do interviews face-to-face, and if I find a person interesting, then I am willing to travel to actually do the interview. I just think talking to a person, especially trying to get their story, can only be done face-to-face and not over Skype or through the phone. So that's why I'm willing to travel, so I can get a quality interview. Today's guest, Mr. Stu Helms. Fantastic freaking guy. He is a food critic and also a tour operator for Ashville Food Tours. He let me take his food tour for free, which I'm eternally thankful for. Fantastic freaking tour. Not only was it great to taste the local cuisine and get a couple free cocktails, but it was very enlightening and insightful about the history of Asheville and where it's going. Stu is a fantastic guy to get to know. I had a great time talking to him, and he's a very deep person. So here's this episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Alright guys, I'm here in Asheville, North Carolina. I just had a really great food tour with this lovely man. Fantastic, and I am going to have him introduce himself and the tour company he hosts. So, Stu, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, I'm Stu Helm. I'm known here in Asheville as the Food Fan, and I lead food tours and I write about food for local blogs and myself. And the tour company I work for is called Ashville Food Tours.
I highly recommend anyone and everyone to take these tours.
Thank you, Frank.
Amazing.
Oh, thanks, Frank.
One, Stu is a great host. He's a great guide. And two, the food, there was nothing, I couldn't think of anything bad I've eaten on this tour or drank. All of it was
tanks.
Good.
No tanks on the tour?
No tanks, and all of it tastes amazing in their own unique way.
Good.
It was
glad.
Fantastic. So, let's talk about you. How did you get started in this? You mentioned on the tour.
Yeah,
why don't you tell the audience?
Kind of give you my tour spiel that I start the tours with. I've been living here in Asheville for about 14 years. I moved here from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up in and around Boston. I've officially lived in Asheville now longer than any city I've ever lived in. So. Still not quite considered a native, but I'm certainly a local. And I came here from Chicago with my lifelong career. I was a working artist my whole adult life. I graduated from art school with a BFA, and I put it to work drawing pictures for a living, paying my rent and bills, drawing pictures and doing graphic design. And as an artist, I worked at home in my home studio. And to keep from going stir crazy, Frank, I would go out to eat a lot. Get out of the house 2 or 3 times a day, eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a late night coffee. Back in those days I drank, and so I'd go out drinking at night and stuff. And so that was just my practice to keep from going crazy. And here in Asheville, when I moved here, there was a good little food scene, and I went out, checked it all out, and then the food scene exploded. And as it exploded, I was checking out all the new restaurants, and I was trying seemed like a new one was opening every week almost, and I was trying them all. My friends noticed that I was eating at the new restaurant, so they asked me to write food reviews. So that's how I got started with that. And I wrote exclusively for Facebook at first, called myself the Facebook Food Critic, and just wrote for my friends, and so I wrote whatever I wanted, which meant that my reviews were full of four-letter words and emojis and teen speak and all kinds of mumbo-jumbo, just trying to make my friends laugh. And also, though, very important to me that I give them a good idea about the food that I'm writing about. And so my motto from the beginning, still to this day, is to entertain and inform. I feel like you can't properly inform people if they're not entertained. And so my first goal is to engage people with my writing and then tell them about great food around town. So my friends loved my Facebook reviews. They encouraged me to get published. I approached a local blog called ashvegas.com, a really popular blog. And the editor published my reviews as they were written, which I was really surprised about. All the swears and emojis and everything. And I thought that my career was going to end before it started. And it was the total secret to my popularity. I became a really popular food writer right away because nobody had ever read reviews that were written like mine that had swears and had jokes. And people told me later, you're the only food writer I read the whole review. I don't like cut to the description of the food. And that my reviews make people laugh out loud. And sometimes my reviews can make people angry at me because they just can't believe that I used the word any hoodles in my review or something like that. And so I saw the writing on the wall when my reviews became so popular, and after 20 years I was actually burned out on art as a career. And so I made a sort of slow and somewhat painful transition from art to writing. I always joke around that if there's one career that's a little tougher to make a living at than art, it is probably writing. And so maybe not the smartest career move I ever made. In the beginning, it might have seemed that way, but now, of course, I've been writing for 6 years, and I've been doing the food tours for about 2.5 years. And the food tours came about because when you're a food writer, you get invited to do food-related things. And so I was invited to take food tours and write about them. And I wrote about them from a point of view. I always try to have a point of view when I write about food. And my point of view was, are food tours fun for locals? Because I mostly, back in the day, wrote for locals. These days I do write for more of a national audience. I still write for local publications, but more and more people are paying attention to Asheville's food scene and coming here on vacation and stuff. So I have more national followers than ever.
Yeah, that's how I found you, because originally when I was coming out here just to interview the episode before yours, and I was looking for some tours, and you came up as one of the number one tours to take in Asheville.
Nice.
And I started reading some of your stuff. I'm like, okay, this guy's going to be he's going to have a good story to tell.
Okay, so you read some of my reviews before you came on the tour?
Yeah, that's why I emailed you. Like, let me see if I can get you on the show.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I try to make my tours very entertaining and very engaging. And I try, as I said with my writing, my tours are very much about like entertaining and informing. I realized at a certain point that just by nature of what I do for a living, I was fortunate enough to have a really broad and deep depth of knowledge about our local food scene. Like, I just know a lot about it. I eat out at almost every restaurant in town. I still go out to eat almost every single day, sometimes a couple times a day. And so I just figured with this breadth of knowledge, I would make a good food tour guide. So I took the tours. I took one with Eating Asheville and one with Ashville Food Tours, and they were both wonderful. Our competitors at Eating Asheville are our friends as well, and so I always recommend their tours to people as well. Mm-hmm. But it was my next tour with a gentleman named Patrick Riles. Everybody calls him Patty for short. And Patty just gave a fantastic tour with Asheville Food Tours. And one of the things I really loved about Patty's tour, and maybe you noticed this about my tour too, is that I incorporated as much history of Asheville
Yeah.
and pointing out architectural details. It's more than just a food tour. It's basically a downtown tour.
It's really interesting because yeah, not only what you just said, not only did we get samples of the local cuisine, it was like a lot of history lessons too.
Yeah.
So it made it interesting, like super interesting.
Asheville's an interesting city with an interesting past, and people who come to visit it these days are seeing it at the zenith of its sort of development. It had a heyday back in the late 1800s, 1920s, right up until the Depression, and then things really dropped off for Asheville, and it was a very depressed economy for a long time. So when people come to Asheville nowadays and they see this wonderful boom town with awesome restaurants everywhere, the streets are full of happy people, that's much different than how Asheville has been in the past. And even when I moved here in 2005, Asheville was still up and coming. Like, it wasn't at all what it is today. There's so many more restaurants and so many more businesses, and just the economy has just blossomed in Asheville. And so I feel like people who come to Asheville, they will be really interested to learn that it wasn't always like this, man. And it was really rough for the people of Asheville. Now, that was before I moved here. It was very economically depressed. And so I like to include those historical tidbits, and I have an amateur interest in architecture, so I like to talk about the architecture. Asheville has, for such a small city in the South and in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains of western North Carolina, Asheville has an incredible collection of architectural, nice architecture, buildings that look great. Some famous ones, of course, like the Biltmore Estate. That's not downtown. But then there's other buildings downtown, like the Jackson Building and the Flatiron Building, and even our City Hall. These are designed by famous architects, and they're not unique in terms of big cities. You go to New York, and there's buildings just like that everywhere you turn. But you go to small cities in the South, and you don't often find a beautiful example of Art Deco architecture.
No, you don't, especially with the mountains as a background.
That's right. It's gorgeous. Being downtown, looking at our City Hall, for example, which was designed by an architect named Ellington, who designed a few of our buildings in town that still stand today. And you're looking at that beautiful City Hall, and right behind it, there's a mountain, like right there. There's a lot of real estate in between, but you can see the mountain right behind City Hall, and there's just nothing better in terms of being a citizen of Asheville than looking up from your day and realizing what a beautiful city you live in.
Yeah, the second to last building or stop we went to the rooftop.
Oh, right. We went to the Capella on 9, which is on the roof of the brand new AC Hotel, so a new building.
That's a wonderful view.
Yes.
You get like a little 360 view of the whole city, and
that's exactly right.
The city is actually nestled in mountains.
Yes,
and that's why it was so beautiful. It's like you look at it, it's like basically the mountain. We're a cradle. Like Asheville's in a cradle of mountains.
It's absolutely true, and the mountains that are closest to town have cool names. There's Sunset Mountain, which of course aptly named. You watch the sunset from the mountain. It's beautiful. There's Bowcatcher Mountain, which I really like, and it's where you go to catch yourself a bow. And then there's Town Mountain, which is the one that's closest to town. And I love the way Southerners name things. A lot of funny names like Bowcatcher, like really, name it what it is. It's the mountain closest to town. It's a Town Mountain.
Town Mountain. So let's talk about cuisine, because the different stops we have, every one of them was unique. One was Italian. The other one was I would say punk rock in a way. The Ox, what was it called?
It's called Ox Bar.
Ox Bar, which was phenomenal. That sheer wine, sangria. It's something that's out of this world. I never tasted anything like that before.
That makes me happy to hear, Frank.
But then you have also too something a little bit more formal, and you call it Appalachian food or
Appalachian food, yep.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I want to learn a little bit more what that is.
Today on our tour, let me get on my schedule. And to let the audience know, Frank and I are eating right now. We stopped at a food truck on our way home.
Yeah.
And we got some food from the Brine House Food, Meat and Provisions, which is owned by the same chef who owns Ox Bar that you're asking me about right now. So
those chicken tacos were amazing.
Smoked chicken tacos.
Smoked chicken tacos. I just devoured them.
You
I'm
did.
sorry if you heard them.
Those down.
Yeah, if you heard them on the mic, I'm sorry. I was trying to back away from the mic, but they were so good. I had to suck them down.
Frank just finished a food tour, at the end of which other people were moaning and groaning, and here he is powering down 3 tacos.
It tastes so good.
That's the thing about the food in this town is it tastes so good. Like, it's hard to resist. I bought 2 entrees from the food truck, one for now and one for later. But yeah, today on our food tour, we went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different venues. We actually had 8 treats or 8 bites because I sent everybody home with 2 cookies from a local baker called 50/50, The Art of Dessert. I always try to send my tours home with a treat at the end. And yeah, of those, we went to a wine bar. We went to a breakfast and lunch place, a fancy sit-down dinner place, and then Ox Bar, which is sort of... I forgot to mention when we were there, but Ox Bar turns into a nightclub at night.
Really?
They push all the tables aside.
You kind of see it.
They DJ, and it's open till 2 a.m. And then we went to Strada, the Italian restaurant, Capella on 9, the rooftop bar that you mentioned. And we ended at the French Broad Chocolate Lounge with some ice cream and chocolate. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we had some Appalachian food, some Italian food, some hipster food, and then a nice treat at the end. And Appalachian food, so we're here in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, in other parts of the country, they pronounce that Appalachian or Appalachian even, but here they pronounce it Appalachian, and so that's the proper way to pronounce it. And some of the restaurants, such as Rhubarb, today we went to Rhubarb, which is a restaurant owned and operated by Chef John Fleer, who is a James Beard nominated chef, and the James Beard Foundation gives out the highest culinary awards in the country. And several of our chefs have been nominated. As you and I speak right now, Chef Katie Button, owner of Curate, is a finalist for a James Beard Award, so I'm hoping she pulls that home. But we popped into Rhubarb, and Chef John is known for a lot of things, but one of the things he's known for is being the chef responsible for bringing Appalachian cooking out of the home kitchen and introducing it to the fancy eating world, like the fancy restaurant world. And John's better at telling his stories than I am, but I'll do my best to tell the one about his cornbread soup, which is an Appalachian tradition. Cornbread soup is something that you make using stale cornbread on Sunday morning, left over from Saturday morning. And to reconstitute it, you put it in a bowl or a glass, and you add some buttermilk to it, a really popular ingredient for a lot of things in the South, buttermilk. And then you add some chopped white onions to it, and you just mix it all up, chop it up with a fork, mush it all up, and you eat it that way. You don't cook it at that point. You just eat it room temperature. And on my tours, I tell this story, and if people are from the South, some of them will be like, oh yeah, my grandfather ate cornbread soup every Sunday morning. And so some people are super familiar with it. So the story is John Fleer working at a fancy restaurant in a fancy resort area, hotel, I believe. And he had a lot of leftover cornbread from Saturday morning brunch, and his dishwasher said to him, oh, you should just make cornbread soup. John had never heard of it, learned the recipe from his dishwasher, fancied it up, of course, turned it from cooking with that apostrophe on the end, to cuisine, and served it to his fancy folks, and got written up about it and stuff. And from there, he really embraced Appalachian cooking, and that's what he does at Rhubarb. And I attended a talk one time with John, and we all, the audience and John, and we all tried to figure out what is the Appalachian approach to food? Like, what is that? And it's a couple of things. We determined it is the ingredients, local ingredients, things you've never heard of in other parts of the country, pawpaw fruit and creasy beans and
I never heard of
ramps and things like that are really common, or pretty common on some of the menus around Asheville these days, ramps especially. Those are local ingredients and colloquial ingredients. Like, can't get them outside of this area, and people don't even eat them outside this area if they could get them. So that's part of Appalachian cooking. The other part is the approach, the using leftover food, the substituting one thing for another because you don't have the other thing. A lot of the most popular food in the world comes from a place of poverty or need, or what you don't have as well as what you do have. Things like kimchi are a way to stretch your vegetables into the winter months so that you are getting more bang for your buck out of your fall harvest and stuff like that. And that's become like one of the most popular foods in the world. And then things like there's a culinary term called the cucina povera, which is Italian for the kitchen of the poor. And that term applies to a lot of the Italian food that we enjoy as Americans, with that bright red sauce, those fresh cheeses like mozzarella or ricotta, and things like pasta and dough. All of those ingredients, really cheap and really easy to make. You can make ricotta cheese at home. And now that's one of the most popular food categories in the whole world. And so a lot of times the best foods come from those places, and the same can be said of Appalachian food. So those are the two ingredients that make it Appalachian: the actual ingredients themselves, the food items, and then the approach. And the approach sometimes comes from a place of let's say, a lack of abundance.
Necessity.
Necessity.
Yeah.
So today we went to Ox Bar, and Ox Bar is a bar that cooks Southern food with a hipster twist, with a lot of wink to Appalachian food as well. And they have something on their menu called vinegar pie. Now, everybody wants to know about the vinegar pie. I saw it there. I'd never had it before. I ordered it. I didn't know what to expect. This chef makes a lot of pickles, so I thought it might be pickle flavored, And it was on the dessert menu, though, so I kind of figured it was one of these Southern foods that doesn't taste like what it sounds like. And so, sure enough, it's a custard pie. It's a very sweet pie. It's basically a chess pie, and a chess pie is a basic Southern custard pie with very few ingredients, really easy to make. If you have a lemon, that is one of the ingredients, is a little bit of squeeze of lemon in it, which is common in a lot of sweets. But especially in the olden days in this part of the country, you wouldn't have a lemon. You wouldn't have a fresh lemon at all. They're just not available to you because of geographical isolation or poverty. And so instead, you would use a little bit of apple cider vinegar, like just a teaspoon maybe for the whole pie. And then, again, I love the way Southerners tend to name things in funny ways. And so even though you can't taste the vinegar, and it is an insanely sweet pie, it's called vinegar pie.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so that's a very Appalachian story of how you make do with what you have. That's a Appalachian saying. And actually, we used to say that up in New England, so I think it's a New England saying as well. But you're making do with what you have. Well, what do we have? Well, what can we make with what we have? So a lot of foraging happens and a lot of sustenance farming and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the episode I recorded yesterday, Cougar, he owns it's called Phenomenal Fungi. It's a mushroom company, and this also segues into another question I want to ask you. He grows mushrooms not only for medicinal purposes, but for restaurants too. And something that you mentioned earlier, which I thought was really amazing about Asheville, because in Jacksonville, there's not a lot of small business restaurants like you have here. You have these individual restaurants that are run unique to the chefs, unique food. But something I thought was amazing that you said on the tour was that it's farm to table. And it's very unique how Asheville does it, because there's literally, you said like a farmer will actually come into their restaurant. Yeah. And what you like kind of enlighten us on that part?
Well, that is one of the best parts about the Asheville food scene, is that it's a very authentic farm-to-table food scene. Now, not everybody really knows what that term means, and it literally just means that there's no food brokers in between the farmers and the restaurants. The farmers are either delivering straight to the restaurants, or the restaurants are going to farmers markets, or the bigger restaurants that go through a lot of stuff, like Chef John Fleer. He has individual relationships with individual farmers around town, or around the area. And so it is absolutely the true story that you could be sitting in a restaurant eating lunch, and a farmer will walk in the front door and will have a bushel basket of some stuff that they grew. And the chef will come out of the kitchen, chat with the farmer, look at the bushel basket, discuss what it is and how to possibly prepare it, and base the evening's menu on what the farmer has brought them that day. That is a true, authentic, straight-up farm-to-table food scene. And that happens all over Asheville. And part of what makes it possible is the sheer number of farms that are in the area. You step 1 foot outside of Asheville city limits and you're suddenly in the countryside.
Yeah, like one thing really noticeable about the food I was eating, not so much how it was prepared. It was just the flavors coming from the vegetables. They were exploding in your mouth. Like they were so fresh and just so vivid. Like I traveled. I love to travel. Only places I can really think of that come close to that is probably Europe.
That's great.
Yeah, but food, because their food's similar. Like their farming has to be more green. Or is it not green, but
more organic?
More organic than the American.
Less genetically modified foods those are banned over in Europe. And things like that. So I'm glad you noticed that. I grew up just like everybody eating regular fruit and vegetables from factory farms bought from grocery stores. And I don't want to be negative about factory farming.
Because we need it.
It feeds the world, or it feeds as many people that it can reach.
They're doing really important work. It's not nothing bad against them.
No, I mean, some practices we'd like to see improved and stuff like that with technology. But that's not the point. The point is that that I grew up eating factory farm food, which is generally raised with fertilizers and quick growth, and some of it ripens not on the vine, but in the packaging and stuff like that. And I switched to organic foods when I was in my 20s. And one of the first things I noticed was that celery is just totally different if it's organic. Or
I never liked celery before, but somebody was telling me on the tour that one of the shops makes their own soda, and you mentioned it a couple times too.
Celery soda.
Yeah, celery soda. I'm like, how's the celery taste good?
If you don't like it, it doesn't. Everything is subjective, of course, when it comes to food. But I'm glad you noticed that the vegetables taste brighter.
Yeah.
And that the flavors really are full of punch and pop, because those are organically raised vegetables that are sold directly to the restaurants fresh, like out of the earth into the kitchen. So I'm glad that it was noticeable to you. Of course, like, we get really used to it here in Asheville. We get used to the quality of the food, and we're some of the most spoiled eaters that you'll ever meet. And I like to travel too, and one of my favorite places to go is New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And,
of course, the Mecca of food.
Yeah, and that's how you think of it. And I'll tell you what, as the years go by, me and my girlfriend will be up in New York, and we'll be like, we kind of miss the food in Asheville, and we can't wait to get back to Asheville and eat the food. And one of the things about it is, in Asheville, we know where all the food came from. Like, we literally can see the name of the farm, and in some cases, I know the farmers. And so that's a big difference. And in New York City, no knock against New York, because I still love it, but you just don't know where that food was sourced from. Like, you just don't know. And that didn't used to be important to me, but these days it's more important because, like I said, we're spoiled here in Asheville.
Yeah, one thing that's not only vegetables are not the only thing that's farm to table. It's also the meat here too, which I thought was fascinating about. You said what was that meat? The bacon that you talked about.
Yes. Now that's Benton's bacon, and that's from Tennessee, but we bring it over to Asheville to cook with. And
come a little closer to the mic.
Sorry about that. So yeah, that's Benton's bacon from Tennessee, and Benton's a pig farmer. His bacon's become very, very popular. It's called the chef's bacon. Some folks have called it the best bacon in the world, and it is truly amazing bacon. And that's a local food product, but it's also used by our chefs as a local ingredient, or it's regional. Like the chefs tell me that they like to source locally, and then regionally, and then nationally, and then internationally, as long as they're getting the best possible ingredients with the smallest carbon footprint. And so they do like to source regionally as well. You can't get everything here in Asheville. So yeah, that's one example. And then there's a farm here called Hickory Nut Gap Farm, and you'll see the initials HNG on a lot of menus around town. And that's to indicate to all of us, the locals, that that meat is sourced from Hickory Nut Gap Farm, like farmers that we know and trust. And there's a business here called Farm to Home Milk that delivers milk in glass bottles to people's front porches.
Oh my God.
From local dairy farms. And they also deliver to the restaurants and stuff.
Yeah, because you mentioned it. I was on the tour, but I had it before I took the tour. 'Cause today I didn't give a shit about calorie counting.
I didn't know we were allowed to swear.
No, you can curse.
Oh my fucking God.
You can curse. Yeah, you could. I saw it.
Fucking shit.
I forgot to
it in, dude.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that before I was giving you the spiel that you could have cursed, but
I'll start now.
yeah. What's the name of that place? We talked about on the way here when I was driving you. You mentioned it on the tour too. They're making Pop-Tarts now. They're making
Sunshine Sandy.
yeah, Sunshine Shammies. I had that before the tour because I didn't eat any breakfast. I was feeling peckish, and I saw them. I thought, why not? And they made a Pop-Tart with jalapeno cream cheese in it. I think it was cream cheese, but it was jalapeno for sure. Amazing. You'd think like it'll taste nasty, but it didn't. It was amazing.
I'm sure that was great. It was like a jalapeno popper with phyllo dough around the outside.
It was good, but like one thing I saw on the or on their menu, it was something about farm fresh milk. Like all of it was farm fresh milk.
That's right.
And you literally, I had a glass of milk too. You can taste the difference in the milk.
Oh yeah, you can. That's better food tastes better. I mean, like that's just the fact. Like higher quality food just does taste better. So Susie at Sunshine Sammy's uses farm to home milk, and all of her ice cream is made with local dairy. Cookies are made with local butter and eggs, and Susie's great during the spring and summer and most of the fall. She's using local ingredients for her toppings and fillings, like local berries and local fruits and local squashes and things like that. But in the wintertime, when she can't get those things locally, she goes crazy and orders she says that's when you can get my exotic stuff. So during the winter, she'll bring in papayas and bananas and go do those things, because she's like, as long as I'm going outside of Asheville, I'll just go way outside and introduce those. So I like that attitude, like she's not rigid about like, well, there's no fruit in season, and so it's plain ice cream for you folks from now on. And there are places that are more rigid, and not in a bad way, like rhubarb. Again, it's not tomato season in this part of the country. Now, they don't want to use hothouse tomatoes, and they don't want to bring tomatoes in from another state like Florida. And so there ain't no fresh tomatoes on their menu to be found anywhere. You can get pickled green tomatoes and you can get fried green tomatoes, but you can't get any. And the fried green tomatoes have actually been pickled, and so they'll do that until tomatoes are in season again, and then they'll be added back on the menu. So that's a very rigid, seasonal restaurant, and that's again John Fleer and his team trying to be as true to the Appalachian mentality as possible, because that's where green tomatoes come from. They come from the Appalachian farmers trying to squeeze one more crop of tomatoes into the season, and then a cold snap could happen, and they got to pick all those tomatoes really quickly before they're ripe. And then way back in the day, the farmers approached the food people and were like, what can you do with green tomatoes? And that's how fried green tomatoes came about. And now you can pickle those. And so when you get a burger at Rhubarb, no fresh tomato instead of pickled fried green tomato. Yeah.
And good thing about that, the Rhubarb restaurant, was that you do get that sense of the environment of the mountain environment in that restaurant, because everything they have that what's the proper word for it? For the decor they have,
I call it rustic chic.
Yeah, they have rustic chic decor, but also they have wooden stoves there.
Yep,
and you can smell
the
it.
Wood. Yeah, that's one of the best smells, is that wood-fired stove in Rhubarb, and they've got cords of wood stacked up, and they've brought in some antique barn board for the walls, and it's decorated really nicely, sort of like as I said, rustic chic, and a little bit of like old school meets hipster, just a touch of hipster decor there. And
but fantastic food, though.
Yeah,
fantastic.
That was a good bite. I
yeah,
didn't have that bite. Yeah, that was good. Good. And how was the cocktail there?
That was good.
Yeah,
but it wasn't my favorite. The favorite one was going to be at Oxlot.
Oxbar?
Oxbar, yeah, Oxbar.
I like that. What'd you call it? Oxlot?
Yeah, that was Oxlot.
That's like Big Lot, meets, Big Box meets Oxlot. I like that. Yeah, they served us their cheer wine sangria, which is I describe it every week, so I'll just go ahead and describe it for you. It's all the fruit and wine that you would find in a sangria, with a little bit of Jägermeister, and then it's topped off with the popular southern cherry soda called cheer wine. And there's a little bit of macerated fruit in there, and macerated fruit has been soaked in alcohol overnight, and the alcohol that Chef Steven soaks it in is King Cobra malt liquor.
Yeah, like you would think that would taste nasty, but that was an amazing freaking cocktail.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, this is amazing.
And that one was invented by the chef himself. So Chef Steven, the chef in the kitchen, he decided he wanted to have some control over the cocktail menu as well. Because cocktail managers, they can come and go just like anybody. And so Steven wanted his cocktail program to reflect his aesthetic, which I described to you guys on the tour, that Steven's one of these cool younger chefs that likes to combine highbrow concepts with lowbrow concepts, high-end ingredients with trashy ingredients. And so his food is that way. So he wanted his cocktails to be that way too. And like you've got sangria, which is a pretty refined beverage, and then you've got Jägermeister, which is mostly known from metalheads, and then you've got cheer wine, which is as trashy as can be, and also awesome.
The King Cobra too.
Yeah, the King Cobra, and the macerated fruit is mostly berries, and they call it cobra berries.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I was laughing. Like the group we were with were laughing when you told us that was King Cobra malt liquor.
Yeah, they love that. And I've learned on Food Tour with that drink, I always make them all take a sip before I describe it, because for real, you bring preconceptions to flavors. If I told everybody it has Jägermeister in it before they took a sip of it, they would have their minds made up that it was a trashy, lowbrow drink that they weren't going to enjoy. So I have everybody take a sip, and then I listen as they all whisper to each other, "It tastes like cheer wine."
Guess what's in it?
Yeah, and then I tell them what's in it, and they light up, man, because they already love it. One sip, and they're in love.
Man. So what are you thinking about? Is your food tour going to grow in the future, or you want to keep it the way it is, or you think the more restaurants you guys have, or more restaurants that come to Asheville, tour is going to get a little bit bigger?
Well, right now there are 2 tour companies in town, and because it is a small town still, we're very respectful of each other and cognizant that we don't want to overwhelm the restaurants with food tours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the restaurants love doing food tours. Like, they tell me all the time, "Oh, we love you guys. That's the easiest thing we do all day is feed the food tours." And so there's no problem there, but we don't want to ever become a burden on them. And so to answer your question, the company has grown. The company is 10 years old, 11 this year, and it was started by a guy named Chris. His name is Chris Ortwine, which, if you're into words, that's a great name for somebody who started a food tour, because the word Ort means crumb, and the word wine, of course, the German spelling of wine. And so his name literally means like a bite and a splash.
A bite and a splash.
I love it. And so Chris started the company, and he started it as a retirement company. He had already retired. And Patty tells the funny story of Chris's wife told him he had to figure out something to get him out of the house because he was driving her crazy. So he sort of invented food tours. They may have been happening in other cities, but Chris wasn't aware of them. So he came up with the concept, and he started them. He ran them himself for about 4 years, I believe, and then Patty came on board, and that doubled the size of the company right there. And then Chris went into true retirement, and Patty took over his tours, so it was back down to 1 tour guide. And then a couple years ago, they hired me, and that doubled the size of the company again. So the company has doubled and shrank twice since it was started. But in the last year, we have hired two part-time tour guides.
Mm-hmm.
We lead now 2 brunch tours on Saturdays because it's our most popular tour and it was selling out all the time. And we don't like to make our tours too big. We capped them at 14 people. So we added a second brunch tour, and that meant hiring a second tour guide. We branched out over to West Asheville and hired a wonderful guy named Dave Bristol, a.k.a. Spaceman Jones, a local rap star, and grew up in West Asheville, and he leads our food tour over there. And so we have grown a little bit, and knock on wood, we're about to launch a bilingual food tour, our first one.
It's going to be Spanish?
English, and the tour guide Luis speaks a little bit of Italian too, so probably converse in Italian if we had someone on the tour who could. Now, it'll be a tour that's like basically available bilingual, so anybody can take it. You know, it'll basically be led in English for the English speakers and in Spanish for the Spanish speakers. And Luis runs a local blog that's a bilingual blog. He writes every story in English and Spanish.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's his thing. Like, he's a bilingual guy. He's an interpreter at the court and just a really nice guy. And he was interested in leading a food tour, and I was interested in having a bilingual food tour, so that worked out great. And so then we'll have another guide on board, and so the company is growing. We're not interested in growing it too big or too quickly. It's a really fun job, and we don't want to lose sight of that. Like, Patty and I love our jobs, and when you pull other people in, it just makes things more complicated and can take away some of the fun and replace it with anxiety. And so we want to make sure the job is always fun for us. In fact, when Patty hired me, he told me, there's really only 3 things you need to keep in mind. He said, make sure the patrons are happy, make sure the restaurants are happy, and make sure you have fun. And I was like, whoa, did I just get 3 rules for my new job, and one of them was have fun? Yeah. So, you know, we want to grow and make sure that we're contemporary and that we're part of the food scene and that we are public and that people know who we are. Restaurants and the public know who we are. But we don't have a lot of ambition to, like, become a franchise that goes into other cities or anything like that.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to stay small.
I've always been what I call a small thinker, and it's worked for me over the years. You know, I've had a small life that's been full of small successes, and it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, because when we stopped at, what was the name of the food truck again?
Brine House.
Brine House. That you designed the logo.
I did.
Tell me a little bit more about your art career, because you said you got burned out a little.
I did, yeah. So I always wanted to be an artist from the time I was a little kid, and I went to art school and I got a BFA and put it to work. I was a working artist for 20 years and drew pictures. I graduated from the illustration department of the Art Institute of Boston, part of Lesley College, and so I drew a lot of pictures for bands, T-shirts, and album covers and stuff, and learned how to use computer and did computer graphics, and was one of the few people at the time who could draw pictures and work with fonts and layout and knew what line width was and what DPI meant and stuff like that. I was the only person from my illustration department that took computer graphic courses. I couldn't believe the other ones weren't doing it, but they weren't interested. And I was like, this is the future. And you can tell how old I am because I thought that computers were the future.
And now that's mandatory.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't imagine any illustration department in the country that doesn't have people learn Illustrator, for one thing, the Adobe product. So that was a good thing for me. I was able to really have a good career based on both illustration and graphic design. But it was the graphic design that eventually burned me out. I did both for 20 years. And as the public became more and more tech savvy and graphic savvy, my graphic design jobs became less and less fun. And I became a pair of hands eventually that other people moved around, and people would just want to see every font and every color. And I probably let myself get pushed around more than I should have, but eventually I was not happy with. I was not proud of my own portfolio, although I had made all my clients happy. I didn't like any of my own work anymore. And this was strictly graphic design. The illustration was different, but both graphic design and illustration take the same creative energy, and so when that energy was depleted, I couldn't draw anymore either. And it was strange for me. I was about 45 years old, and I completely lost all my desire to draw pictures, as well as any desire to work for clients, pushing fonts around. And at the same time, I had casually started writing about food and was getting paid for it here and there. And I decided to just take the leap and write about food. And that was difficult for me, Frank, because, as I mentioned, since the time I was a little kid, I wanted to be an artist, and I was. And so I had achieved my ultimate goal of becoming an artist, and I had success in terms of that's how I made my living, but I was also looking forward to more success and bigger success and greater success as an artist, and publishing more work and having multiple books and stuff like that. And I had projects that were in the works that I had to set aside because I could no longer drum up the energy to work on them anymore. And so it was heartbreaking for me in a lot of ways. And it was, I guess, a little bit of a midlife crisis, you could even call it, because here I was switching careers at 45 years old, a career I'd worked really hard at and had a lot of clients and stuff. And then jumping into this other field that was a complete unknown, and not having the option of going back to the other career because I no longer had the drive anymore.
Yeah.
You need drive to be creative. So yeah, that's and I you can detect the sad tone to my voice when I talk about my art career, and that's because I miss it. I do kind of sometimes wish that I had been able to continue and found those later successes that I was looking forward to. And there are specific projects that if I were to dig them out and look at them, they would make me very upset that I was never going to finish them. And so it's a chapter of my life that is closed now. I still do some graphic design for myself. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of competitions and events, and I do my own graphic design, and I enjoy it a lot. Like, that's one of the reasons I do events, is so that I can do the graphic design. And that's so much different because I don't have a client to please. I'm my only client. So I still do a little bit just because it's fun. But I don't know that I'll ever get back into art as a career. I highly doubt it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to be police officer. And that was a career I loved. Unfortunately, I became a whistleblower, and it was sad leaving that career.
I bet
it was sad, and I felt like when you mentioned that, it reminds me of that. No, you love something, but you had to let it go too.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty powerful that you were a whistleblower, because not only did you leave that career, but I'm sure that there were a lot of emotions around it in terms of your colleagues' attitude towards you and your attitude towards them.
Fortunately, I had a lot of support.
That's good.
That was a good thing.
I'm glad.
So I know it's a couple of years, because this happened in Savannah, Georgia. I had this intense fear of going back to Savannah. Whenever I got a subpoena in the mail for going to court, I was just afraid to go back there. Then I went there for a colleague's wedding, and I felt better about it because I was accepted again. Uh-huh. Then I had to go back to someone who I respected a lot, and she was my confidant. Uh-huh. She was retiring, and there was a lot of cops there, and some of them didn't say hi to me, but most of them were happy to see me. Good. And it was good because, like, at the time, it was a lot of fear.
Sure,
there was a lot of fear going back there. I didn't know what they would think about me, and it was nice to be nice that most of them embraced me.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice ending. The stories never end, but that sounds like better than living with the unknown and anxiety of not going back and not having those people embrace you.
Yeah, it's closure. It feels good, but yeah, going back to what you said, I can understand how there's something that you love and you have to give it up.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna click on some lights.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're doing this from Stu's house. It's really lovely. He has some great pictures on here you got from a thrift store. And would you mind if I take a picture so I could put it on the Instagram?
Yeah.
If you guys want to check out the show's webpage under the episode, or go to the show's Instagram, you'll see some of the pictures. But it's I'm into that gypsy art.
I like thrift store paintings of women. So I have
the beautiful paintings though.
Women hanging in my living room that are period pieces from like the 60s and stuff. Semi-nudes. And a couple of landscape paintings as well.
Yeah. So we're gonna go into the question part of the episodes.
Okay.
Usually these episodes run just a little bit longer. Only thing is because it's a little short because
go watch your Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
For
what time is it, Frank?
Right now is 7:04.
Okay.
And for anyone that's listening a year from now, today is April 14th, 2019, and I'm a big Games of Thrones fan. And
as am I.
Asheville having a couple bars here that are doing a viewing party. Yeah. And I thought I should go check it out. And Stu took me to one earlier. He gave me a little tour. And there were people cosplaying and in costume. I'm like, you know what? I'm going there. This seems fun.
Yeah, we went to two. One was Banks Ave.
Banks
Ave.
Ave.
That was like 5 sad-looking people in
they look
Hawaiian
fun.
shirts. And then we went to Urban Orchard, and it was like people dressed like Daenerys.
It was like 10 Daenerys.
yeah, it was like whole different.
There's
scene.
one pretty good hound. I saw him like, man, that's some pretty good makeup he had.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, I was looking at him like, that is some good makeup.
I saw the Night King. I thought that was good too.
That was good.
Full head costume. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, so
we'll cut this a little short. I don't mind.
A little short,
yeah.
but okay.
All for a good cause.
For anyone that is a first-time listener, and for anyone that's returning, I thank both of you. These questions I ask, these are interpersonal questions. They're psychological questions. I show another side of a person. I do this with everyone on the show. The reason why is because I think it's fun to ask these questions. And also, too, the show is supposed to be about empathy. I get interesting people on here, and I get people that are have some very unique lives and viewpoints that not everyone's going to agree with. But the reason for these questions also is to show that you can relate to another person. If you just listen to their story, you could relate to them, and that's a good start. So that's why I asked these questions at the last half of the interview. So let's get started. Given the choice of anyone in the world from any time period, who would you want as a dinner guest and why?
Okay. I would love to. I would love to have dinner with Noam Chomsky.
That's the first time I heard that one.
He's a political person. He's a genius, and he talks about politics and sociology and social structures, and he's very radical left, in my opinion, left wing, politically left wing, and so am I. And I would love to have dinner with Noam Chomsky, and I would love to try to make Noam Chomsky laugh out loud over dinner.
Yeah, I haven't read anything or heard anything about Noam Chomsky. The only reason I know of him because that comedian Duncan Trussell.
I don't know that.
He's a funny comedian, but he
talks about Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, he rarely brings up Noam Chomsky.
Oh, that's fucking great.
You guys gotta listen to Noam Chomsky. I'm like, who the hell is Noam Chomsky?
Read some of his essays. You'll want to slit your wrists afterwards. They're so depressing.
Oh my god. What would constitute a perfect day for you? That
one's easy for me, man, because I'm a simple person. I'm a lifelong fan of marijuana, and so I would wake up and smoke some weed, and my days are almost perfect every day, Frank. I get on the internet, converse with my friends all over the country, go downtown, eat wonderful food, drink the best coffee in the world, hang out with my friends, my beautiful girlfriend Dawn, and just chilling and relaxing, eating and drinking good things is a perfect day for me. And right now it's gray and rainy outside here in Asheville, as Frank and I are talking. That's my perfect kind of weather.
And the thing about Asheville is very beautiful out here, even when it's raining.
Yes. Yeah, it's lush and green, and I have a nice yard with lush green things, and so a relaxing day for me, Frank. A day where my calendar says I don't have anything to do that day.
Nothing to do.
Yeah.
It's funny because you eat so much, but you're so skinny.
Thank you.
It's funny because it's like you were telling me on the way here that you walk everywhere. Well, which will make sense because I'm like, how could you eat so much, be a food critic, and still be skinny?
I'm almost a manic walker. I walk to work, I walk for work, I walk home from work. I have a big yard. I mow my lawn 4 times a week, walking around that big yard. And, yeah, I'm like kind of a manic walker in a way. Yeah.
Walk. Oh my god. If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be?
I often wish that I had had some. Well, I'll just say I wish that I had had some people that recognized that some of the things that they thought were deficits in my personality were actually assets. Some aspects of my personality were tamped down by society and family, school, things like that, and I learned how to suppress those aspects of myself for a lot of time and dislike myself because of them. And any time as an adult that I've allowed myself to express my personality, it's actually worked out in my benefit. And you can see from doing the tours and from talking to me now and reading my writing that my own personality is one of the big parts of my career now. And so I just kind of wish that I had had some people around me that encouraged me to be a little bit more myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. This show and the podcast and the website I run, I use a pseudonym only because I want to keep it separate from work. But nobody at work, I don't tell them anything about this only because I feel like I'll think they'll think I'm weird, and 2, I just don't want work life interfering with the art because I consider this art, and I need the freedom.
Yeah, no,
to do
I understand that completely. Yeah.
Yeah, we're living weird times right now, so you gotta be a little careful because of that.
You can't. Yeah, you have to be real comfortable with your surroundings to really let your personality shine these days.
Yeah, it's actually yesterday on that episode where it's funny because it was a husband and wife who I interviewed, and she's a HR person, but she agreed when I told her I think one of the main problems with why Americans may be so depressed. My theory was called the HR problem because I think it's human resources departments may be one of the causes.
Huh.
My theory was you have so many people getting easily offended, they're going to the HR department and they're getting these people in trouble or because some guy made a off-color joke or made a little sexist joke, and which it's not a big deal. But now people are afraid that can't be themselves at work, and because they might lose their livelihood. So I call it, that's my little theory why, maybe one of the reasons why Americans have so much depression is because of that.
Huh. How'd the HR lady like that theory?
So she liked it. So it makes sense. She's like, yeah, there's too many people complaining.
Complaining's a national pastime in America.
Yeah.
I love to complain, so I'm part of the problem.
Okay, this is a fun one. If you were arrested and your family and friends were not aware of what you were charged with, what would they assume you were arrested for?
Marijuana. Yeah, straight up. Busted with weed. Yeah.
Have you ever been busted before?
I've been harassed by the man and stuff. Yeah. I've spent Spent a night in jail when I was a teenager for chewing and screwing out of a restaurant. All of my restaurateurs will love knowing that about me. My restaurant owning friends. And I have been arrested for drinking in public when I was younger as well.
Oh, okay. It's minor.
Yeah, nothing major at all. But if my family heard I got arrested, they would all assume it was because I got busted with pot.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, they know I do this one thing that's illegal.
That's one thing I do regret as a cop, making those arrests. Because that's what
it's nice for us to hear over on this side, sir.
No, like I smoke pot now. It's been very helpful for me.
Sure.
I remember the first time smoking it, I thought, what the hell? Why is this illegal? What? Like, this is amazing. This is amazing. Like, I felt good for days afterwards. I'm like,
that's great.
That's the one, because my first big arrest, or not even big arrest, my first arrest by myself, I was outside of the training program. I was no longer a rookie, was a pot arrest, and then now looking back, it's like, man, I screwed that guy over.
That sucks.
For a blunt.
Yeah.
For a blunt. I'm hoping that he didn't get screwed over that much.
Yeah.
But that's the one. If I could take back anything, it would be those arrests.
You know what? I'm not kidding. That's actually nice to hear an ex-cop say that you have a regret about busting people for marijuana.
Yeah, because it's stupid why it's illegal. Like, you listen to the reason, like, the actual facts behind why it's illegal, and like the what's the word? It starts with a P. Not paraphernalia. Well, anyway, the false lies about marijuana.
The propaganda.
Propaganda. There we go. Yes. The propaganda, and especially how they link Mexicans to marijuana, saying that Mexicans are evil because of marijuana.
Yeah.
This was back in the 30s or 40s.
Yes. Yeah.
No, it's and plus there's too many benefits of just growing it.
It's just such a mild and innocuous drug compared to the drugs that are available today, legally, illegally. It's just, I know some of the officers in Asheville, and our Sheriff Quentin Miller, said, he's our new sheriff, said he was not interested in prosecuting marijuana offenses any longer.
Yeah, I mean, I know that was when I was a cop. We were going, personally, we were going to that route. Like, if we found out someone, it's like, okay, throw it out.
Yeah. You don't need to ruin somebody's day, week, month, life.
It's actually taxing the justice system.
It is.
It's not only, one, you're wasting time that could be used for other investigations or other crimes. Two, you're wasting the DA's time, and you're wasting taxpayer money.
Yeah.
So it's not worth it anymore.
No, it's on its way out all over the country, and come back when it's legal here. I'll take you on the edibles tour.
Oh, that's gonna be. I gotta be careful with edibles because last time I try to take just a small amount.
Yeah. Because
if I take too much of a large amount, I have a bad trip.
Yeah, they can be, because then they're in you. It's not like smoking when you take a puff. Am I high? And then take another puff.
You can just wait.
It's it's in you, and then there's nothing
you got to ride that out. Hold on. Yeah. Ride this baby out.
That's funny.
All right. If you wake up tomorrow and get any power ability, what would it be and why?
Like a superpower type of thing? I'd just go classic. I'd love to fly. Like, how cool would that be, man? Fly around. That is classic little kid type of, if I had a superpower type of answer. Yeah. Can I also have super strength, though?
I'll let you have it.
Can I punch my way through buildings as I fly around? All right, then I get two.
I get
2 for 1. Super strength, and I can fly.
All right. What, if anything, is too serious to be joked about?
Oh, there's lots of things that I feel like are too serious to be joked about, and context matters a lot in terms of when it's appropriate to joke about things and not. And I don't really want to give examples because that's part of the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely, there are definitely serious subjects that shouldn't be joked about and shouldn't be taken lightly, especially in certain contexts.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a little fun one I'm starting to do more often. What conspiracy theories do you believe in?
Well, I have to admit that I think there's a lot more behind 9/11 than what we know, or what we're told.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I don't prescribe to any particular conspiracy theories. I can't detail any theories. I try not to get too distracted by conspiracy theories, but I am totally not satisfied with the so-called answers that we've been given about such an amazingly huge and important event. I feel like it wasn't ever properly explained to us. And in those same lines, on a much smaller scale, I really am totally not satisfied with the answers we received about the Las Vegas shooter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know of any particular conspiracy theories about him, but I think there are a lot of things that we don't know about situations like that are big, dangerous, terrorist type situations, and the public is a lot of times just left out of the details about it. I don't know. I try not to get too wrapped up in those things, because you'll go a little crazy. But I just feel like there's certain big news stories that we just don't hear all the details about.
Yeah, one thing that was weird to touch on the 9/11 thing was a couple of years ago. I think there was a massive lawsuit. They were I think citizens were trying to sue Saudi Arabia. Was the victims of the families because they were saying that Saudi Arabia had a hand in doing it, but there was no war in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And I think the senators stopped the lawsuit.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought was like, it's fucked up.
Yeah,
it's pretty fucked up.
There's a lot of bad things that go on in this world that we're never gonna know about the real details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fun.
Fun conspiracy theories are better.
Yeah.
Right? So I like Bigfoot and UFOs and shit like that,
Because it's fun. Because the thing is, you could think there's some type of believability to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do. Like, in my heart, I hope that there are unknown species of large hairy hominids that live in the mountains of North Carolina and upper Pacific Northwest area. Like, I really hope that Bigfoot exists. And so it is more fun than 9/11 conspiracies, which are no fun at all. Yeah, the worst.
All right. Here's a little personal one. When was the first time you fell in love, and how did it happen?
I have been a sucker for love my whole life, and so I fell in love with a girl named Heather Rose when I was in first grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt very much in love with her, and it was something I kept to myself. I was too shy to tell Heather. But yeah, that was my first experience with this sort of feeling of love, and then I felt it many times over my childhood. I was a child who would fall in love with other little girls and stuff like that, and so I've been familiar with the feeling of love my whole life. I've experienced a lot of love as an adult. I've been with my girlfriend now for 14 years and have had other long-term relationships with lovely women, and yeah, that my whole life, Frank, I've been in love. What was the second part of that question? How old was I? And
no, when the first time, and how did it happen?
How did it happen? Oh, I sat behind Heather Rose in home, like the first class of the day. She sat in front of me, and she was just really cute, sweet. She was a really sweet girl. Yeah,
first love.
Yeah.
All right.
She's still my Facebook friend, by the way. She does not know that she was the first girl I ever fell in love with, so maybe she'll hear it on this podcast, Frank.
Tell her. Tell her. See what happens.
Yeah.
What was the most terrifying moment in your life?
That was easy for me. I took an airplane ride one time from Boston to Chicago, and something went wrong with the airplane, and we had to turn around and go back to Boston to land.
Yeah.
And they said, the pilot came on, and he said, we're going to turn around and go back to Boston because there's a problem with the hydraulic system, he specifically said. And I was like, oh my God, like the hydraulics, that's like the wing flaps and the landing gear, and that's like important shit. And I was also thinking, we're almost to Chicago. Why the fuck are we turning around? Like, shouldn't we just push through to Chicago? And I realized, oh, there's a harbor right next to Logan Airport, so maybe they're thinking no
water landing,
no wheels, water landing. Yeah, so the plane was very loud and bustly, and then the pilot, then it started to make this arcing turn, and things started to quiet down. The pilot came on, made this announcement, and the plane went dead quiet, like a funeral. Like silence for the entire, I think it was a 45-minute ride back to
shit.
Not a word spoken. And I was more or less coming to terms with my maker. You know, I was like thinking about things like, did I fall in love enough? Did I enjoy life enough? Am I happy? Can I die happy? You know, and I came to grips with all that, and the answers were good. Yes, I've enjoyed life. Yes, I have been loved and in love. Yes, I could die happy. I also asked myself at that moment, should I pray? Do I believe? I've always been agnostic, and so I was like, do I pray to God? Like, what do I do? And at that moment, when the chips were down, I wasn't feeling it, so I just reflected on my own life, and that was a nice thing for me to know, that I wasn't like some sort of hipster agnostic, that I didn't like fall to my knees and beg for my life to an unknown God at the very end. And of course, the end of the story is that I'm sitting here talking to you right now, Frank. We landed just fine. But it was a frightening moment. And when we came into the airport at Logan, there were fire trucks and stuff like screaming across the tarmac towards us. So they didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen. We touched down. It was all good. The second that we came to a full stop, the cabin erupted again in conversation and emotion. And the guy next to me, who I had not spoken a word to at all, like I didn't talk to him on the way or on the way back. He was just the guy. I said hello to him, you know, and then sat there and we did our crosswords or whatever. I did mine. He read his magazine. And he and I were best fucking friends from the minute we touched down, and chatting our heads off, getting to know each other. We all get up, got on another plane, and that was the end of that. But it was frightening. I really thought this was it. And shorter story, but similar kind of fear. I once, and this one's more ironic, I almost once choked to death on a piece of toast.
Ooh.
Yeah, it got lodged in my windpipe, and it got lodged in... I exhaled on the inhale, it got lodged, and so I had no air in my lungs, and my vision started to go, and I thought for sure I was all alone, and I thought, this is it, dying right now, and it was taking seconds, like less than a minute, and my vision started to pinhole, and I had the frame of mind to swig a glass of water, and because it was toast, it dissolved, and I was fine. But both of those were moments where I faced what I thought could be my last moment, and they were both pretty frightening.
Fuck. Oh, God.
Not bad compared to some other people's actual experiences with pain, actual moments where they really were in some trouble. Was it you? Somebody was just telling me that they were in a house. Was it you telling me you were in a house a hurricane tore apart?
No,
somebody was just telling me that it was the bartender at Strata was telling me that he and his friends in like 2005 or something like that were huddled in a closet in a house as the house was torn apart by a hurricane and saying goodbye to each other. Like, this is it. And survived, of course, but like that's a real frightening experience. So mine are pretty mild, but they were still scary for me.
Fuck. Yeah, every time I hear those stories, I get a little goosebumps.
Really? My airplane story gave you goosebumps?
Yeah, I'm like,
yes, I love it.
Yeah, when I hear stuff about that, because I question if I'm doing the right stuff in my life. It scares me sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, only thing I could do is just live at the moment.
Well, Frank, from what I know about you, you seem like a very thoughtful person, and I think that's one of the keys to being happy at the end of life, is to look back and say I was a thoughtful person.
Yeah, I think I was.
Still are, Frank. You're still here.
Still here. What are your deepest held beliefs?
Deepest held beliefs? I strongly believe that being nice is one of the keys to success. We sometimes hear this cliche that nice people finish last, and to me that couldn't be further from the truth. Anything I've ever gotten out of life that was worth having, I got from being nice. And I'm attracted to nice people, and I do nice things for nice people, and so they benefit from being nice, just in terms of our relationship. And so that's one of my really strongly held beliefs, is I can be a hater just like anybody else, and I'm well known for being like kind of a curmudgeon and shit, but I'm also pretty well known for being a nice person and treating people nicely. So that's one of my strongest beliefs. Now, I have another thing that I say quite often that is something that I observed about people, and so you could say this is a belief as well. I have observed that all of us only want two things out of life, and those two things are something familiar and something different. And it relates to everything from food to romance to movies, any subject that you can think of that involves human desire. It is a desire for comfort and excitement, familiarity and difference. And so once I sort of figured that out, it made life a lot easier to approach in terms of how to treat other people and how to make them happy. And I use that philosophy on Food Tour with a lot of the food we had today fit right into those categories. The dish we had at Ox Bar with the slow smoked pork and the rice porridge, totally something familiar and something different at the same time. So those are a couple of things for you, Frank. Yeah. Be nice and the familiar different thing.
The familiar different thing.
Those are my things.
What's something that you're proud of but never had an excuse to talk about?
Something I'm proud of but never had an excuse to talk about. Well, I can use something from today as an example. I had two people on the tour today that took a coffee tour with a young woman named Jerica yesterday. And I'm real proud to say that I consulted with Jerica and encouraged her to start her coffee tour and even helped her to lay it out and give her a bunch of ideas about how to run it. And so it made me really proud to hear that these two folks had taken a coffee tour with Jerica and they enjoyed it very much. So that was really cool.
Coffee tour. Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I know there's people who are addicted to coffee and they'll probably love doing something like that.
You're looking at one of them right here. I'm so addicted to coffee. After this interview, I'm going to have a cup.
Okay. What is your most treasured memory?
Most treasured memory? Holy moly. I very much enjoyed summers that I would spend on my grandparents' farm in upstate New York in a small town called Fredonia. And I just have my most treasured memories are of being in the old house on the farmland, and the house was big and had a lot of little rooms, and I still have a lot of dreams about that house and exploring the little rooms and stuff. And so my most treasured memory would have to be an amalgamation of those memories.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's the biggest sacrifice you've made?
I haven't had to make too many sacrifices. I I don't think I've made any sacrifices, to be honest with you. I've had a fairly easy life, and I haven't had to sacrifice much. I guess I could say I decided to never get a driver's license because when I was young, I drank too much. And so I sacrificed my own mobility because I was afraid of hurting other people as a drunk driver. But that wasn't a real sacrifice because I was really giving up a driver's license just so that I could drink a lot when I was young. And now I don't drink at all. So
what made you quit?
Being too drunk all the time. I was a heavy drinker, and I drank into my 40s. Started when I was a teenager. And so by the time I was 40, I was like, what the fuck am I doing, man? And alcohol is one of those things. It's hard for some people to recognize that this is not a good life. It's not a good lifestyle. And I grew up partying. Like, that was everybody in my town partied from young age on. And it was a point of pride if you could drink a lot, and any drug that anybody threw in front of you, go ahead and do it. And I was fortunate that I didn't like any other drugs but marijuana. Like, I really don't like other drugs. I just like weed. And but I did like to drink, and so I drank a lot. And I quit because I was 45 and I was still drunk. And I didn't want to be a 45-year-old drunk anymore.
At least you got that awareness, because a lot of people, like you said, will think it's a problem, or have that self-awareness, like, yeah, I need to stop.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you did.
It's incredible how much this society encourages drinking.
Yeah, I Friday night decided to have too many drinks, and I feel like I was a mess, and I felt really just guilty about it the next day. Like, man, that was stupid.
I one time commented to a friend of mine that the hangovers were not worth it, and he said, "Oh, it's the emotional hangovers." That's the guilt the next day is part of it. So yeah, there were a lot of reasons to quit. I miss it sometimes, I don't miss the being drunk, although that was really fun. Like, that was part of why I drank, was to get drunk. But I miss the flavor of alcohol, and I miss the fact that these days, now that I don't drink, there's tons of great beer, tons of great cocktails. I even think I would enjoy wine, which I never drank when I was a drinker. And I think if I didn't have a problem with alcohol, I would be able to enjoy it with all the food I enjoy these days. So I feel I have some remorse that I sort of burned myself out on alcohol before I was old enough to really enjoy it for the flavor rather than for the narcotic effect.
Okay. All right. Last question, and this is a question I ask to everyone. It's a two-part question, and it's a very deep question. What is the worst thing you have ever done in your life, and what's the best thing you have ever done in your life?
Well, speaking in general terms, telling lies is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And being honest is the best thing I've ever done in my life. Now, specifically speaking to one specific incident, the thing I did in my life that I probably feel the worst about is I killed a small animal when I was a small child. And I feel really bad about that, even to this day. And so that I still feel like is perhaps the worst thing I ever did. The best thing I ever did would have to be any time I honestly and truly helped somebody with a problem they were having, and the outcome was good for them. So I don't know that I could pinpoint anything right now, but being helpful is always the best thing I can do. So, I would have to think a little harder to come up with one specific incident where I helped somebody. But, yeah, anytime somebody says to me, thank you, oh, well, let me give you a specific example. I wrote a piece on Facebook not too long ago that talked about the word potential and how harmful that can be to people. And it was a long piece, and in it I said, you can say that a restaurant has potential or that a rundown house has potential, but you should never tell a person they have potential or that they're squandering their potential, because you don't know what that person has experienced to get where they are. Like,
Yeah.
And it was because somebody had just told me, they were trying to make me feel better by saying, you have so much potential. And all I hear is, you're such a failure because you haven't reached your potential. And what this person doesn't know is the negative potential that I have. You know, I have the potential to be a outrageous alcoholic. I have the potential to be a drug addict, perhaps. Potential to be a deadbeat dad, you know, or whatever. And the things I have achieved are, it took me a tremendous amount of effort, emotional and everything. So it really hurts when people say you have potential. And for a child, that can be devastating to constantly tell them you have so much potential, because that tells the child you're not living up to my expectations of you. You never know what the child is struggling with just to get where they are. So I wrote this long piece just to get it off my chest, and a person wrote me a letter, that a person I didn't know very well that follows me on Facebook wrote me a note 2 weeks later saying that they had cried. I'm gonna cry a little bit. They had cried every day since they read my thing. I'm sorry, Frank.
That's okay.
They had cried every day since they read my thing, and it caused them to think about all the times that they had beat themselves up because they didn't reach their potential based on their parents' expectations or their friends' expectations. And that person thanked me a lot for what I wrote, and that made me feel really good. And so, I'm sorry, that was an example of something that I feel like I did something good by exposing my emotional issues.
Your vulnerability.
Yes, that's the word right there. So, there you go. Sort of a specific example of...
No, it's very beautiful.
Be at my best.
It's beautiful because, like I'm going through a time right now. I'm 31 and worrying about potentials and my expectations, and this year I just wrecked myself over it, and not worth it. Like I'm pursuing. This is something I find meaningful. Writing is something I find meaningful, but sometimes too high expectations could hurt you in the end. It could be more devastating than not having any goals or any direction.
Yeah, it can be. It can be more devastating than being a little bit adrift.
Yeah.
You know. So, well, I'm glad that I'm glad you asked me that question. Sorry, I got choked up.
No, it's
I know that makes for bad audio, but
no, it makes for something real.
But yeah, I mean, like that was a nice moment for me when I read that letter. So yeah, there you go, Frank.
All right. I want to thank you so much, and sorry that, like I said before, I'll tell the audience again. Usually, I like to go a little bit more in depth, but I want to see this Game of Thrones go to this viewing party, so we have to cut this a little bit short. But I want to thank you again. Thank you for the food tour. It was amazing. Why don't you tell everyone how they can find you, how they can get tickets to the tour, and that information. Okay, I would love if people would follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook. Stu Helms Food Fan is how you would find me on both Facebook and Instagram. Please follow me there. You can read me on my website, which is StuHelmsFoodFan.com. You can read me on AshVegas.com and DigLocal.com. And you can look up our food tours on AshvilleFoodTours.com and sign up for a tour right there. All right. Yeah. I'll put the information into the episode description, so make it easier for you guys to find it. Thank you again. Thank you for inviting me in your house. And I'm glad that I was able to come out here to Asheville and do these 2 episodes and actually explore it some more. Well, I thank you very much, Frank, for coming on the food tour. You were a fun part of the food tour. I kind of used you as the prop for some of my jokes today. I was the only single man on that tour. We made it. Everyone those couples. Everyone had everyone was couples except for me, and I had to be moved around because of that.
Yeah, right.
The odd
Get
man
out of
out.
the seat, Frank, so the couples can sit with each other. But thank you for asking me to be interviewed for your podcast.
Well, thank you for accepting it. All right, guys, don't forget to check out the website, ataboolife.com, where you could listen to other interesting episodes, great short stories, poems, because I am that sappy. And don't forget to subscribe too. Thank you guys again, and I'll talk to you later.